Welcome, I'm Keith Gushard, the voice you hear, one of the reporters with the Meadville Tribune, and with me is Rick Green, our editor, and who you see is Congressman Mike Kelly, who is the incumbent for the congressional seat, the 16th District, which represents Crawford and other counties in northwestern Pennsylvania. He's the Republican candidate for the 2024 election, and welcome, and we'll give you a chance to do a couple minutes on an opening statement.
Well, it's good to be back with you, and we've done this many times before. I think one of the important things, and I after being in elected office since 2011, I really do believe we need to get people from the private sector developing policy when we talk about anything. People who have been in government all their life have absolutely no depth of what it's like in the private sector to survive it. So where I come from, listen, family business. My parents started in 1953, a Chevrolet business. I moved to Butler in 1957. I bought it from my father in 1997. It was a Chevrolet Cadillac agency at that time. I've since added Hyundai, Kia, Toyota, Mitsubishi. 1966 graduate of Butler High School. 1970 graduate of Notre Dame University. Father of 4, grandfather 10. My wife and I just celebrating our 51st wedding anniversary. And I think more than anything else, because I mentioned it early, resumes are really important. I hear all the time about, well, I think we should do this, I think we should do that, and my answer is, oh, that's interesting, have you ever done it? And they look at you kind of with a blank stare, say, well, why would you ask that question? I said, well, I think a lot of us go to doctors from time to time. I never would just ask somebody on the street, what do you think I ought to do? I'm not feeling too good. You usually go to find the best person you can to handle those things. I think we're in a position right now. And for me, being in business all my life, having to make payroll, developing a pension system for the people that work with us, and health care for them, I am acutely aware of what it takes to make those things work. Also sat in the school board at Butler for 4 years. And I would encourage anybody, please run for school board. If you can't run for school board, go to your school board meetings to find out what's going on with our children, what our curriculum looks like, what textbooks we're looking at. That's our whole future. They talk about percentage as far as population. 25% of our population is youth. It's also 100% of our future. I think we've kind of lost sight of what it is that we have to do. I think we have an incredible responsibility as parents to raise our children. I just think, and I've watched it, we're going too far. We're going into government programs and not going into strong nuclear families in order to make sure that our kids grow up the right way. So the time I've spent in Congress, it's been interesting for me. I went in because in 2010, the government had sent me a notice saying they were going to take away one of my franchises. General Motors got in trouble. They went to the government. The government then took over General Motors, and one of the first things they did was start eliminating dealers. Now, I had a franchise, 5-year franchise. I've been 2 years into it. I got a letter, a 39-page letter, so we're going to take that business away from you. All I was supposed to do was sign a release form, or I could go to court. I went to court. Cost me a lot of money, but I got to keep a business I already owned, and got to keep it from a government who has absolutely no background in the automobile business. So when I talk to people, I talk to people from, I have been on the ground, I have been on the field, I have been knocked down, I have been able to get back up. We make payroll twice a month. We have pension programs, we have retirement programs, we have health care, we do all these different things. So I'm somebody who's actually been involved in things, not just talk about them, not book smart, but actually on the field, I've actually done it. So, as I said, I serve on probably one of the most important committees in Congress, the Ways and Means Committee, and I'm the subcommittee on tax policy. When people ask about the different committees, I'm sometimes surprised that they don't understand that it is the committees that run all types of policy that come out of the Congress. So that's a critical position to be in. So listen, I've been there now since 2011. Good days, bad days, some days that you look and just scratch your head and say, I don't know who elected these people, but I do know this, they're there. And as we look going into the future, I tell people all the time, please look at resumes, look at game films. What have these people actually done? Don't listen to what they say. Look at on the field, what have they done? What have they done in their communities? Do they have families? Have they raised children? Have they educated children? Have they been all through those steps of life, some of which is wonderful and some of the other stuff is hard. So I've been there, I've done it. I can say I enjoy it. We have a great team. and everybody that's in Congress right now, it really is not just the member of Congress, it's the team that you work with every day. We have 16 incredible people that serve the needs of 750,000 people in Pennsylvania's 16th congressional district. So it's good to be with you all. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. What do you, if you get reelected, what's your top priority going into the next session of Congress?
I think everybody's got the same priorities. Number one, we've allowed the gates to be opened. Immigration policy was thrown aside. We have allowed people to come into our country. We don't even know how many are here. I hear people say it could be 12 million, it could be 15 million, it could be. Here's what I know. Our borders are wide open. Southwestern border is a disaster. We have people from over 130 some countries that have come into America, a lot of them unvetted. I don't know why they're here. But if you come to America and your first act upon coming to America is to break one of our laws, that's not a good way to start. Now, I also have something called the Northern Border Security Caucus. 5,500 miles. Our northern border is the longest continuous border between any two countries in the world. It is totally unguarded right now. We don't have numbers on it because there's no way to calculate it. So I'm concerned about immigration. I'm also concerned about inflation. I don't think there's anybody out there that can look at where were we in 2019, 2020, what were we paying for a gallon of gas, what were we paying for a dozen eggs, what were we paying for any of our utility costs, what were we paying, and you look at it now and my goodness, it's gone up from a minimum of 20 to 25% an item up in some cases 60% over what it was back then. So we have people pouring into the country. We don't know who they are or what they're going to do here. I would like to think that people come here to make America great, and unfortunately some people are here to take advantage of America. The other thing is with the inflation the way it is, people are having a hard time making ends meet. Now I'm not talking about the very wealthy. I'm talking about the people that I represent. Our average annual income for a family of four in Pennsylvania 16 is $54,000. That's gross income. Now, some of my colleagues in Congress tell me, you must be kidding. It can't be that low. I said, you know what, that's the average. For some of the people I represent, it's much lower. And then the other thing, quite honestly, is energy. Domestic energy and the development of it has been put on hold. Of all the items that we talk about, when it talks about inflation, energy has a role to play in every one of those things. So when you look at domestic energy being held down, we're buying food for our fuel from people around the world who are our enemies. We're paying them a premium price for it. We're not developing our own. We're putting our own people in a difficult position because now that it has a great influence on inflation. And as you look at all these different things, you say, why would anybody wonder why things are as difficult as they are right now? There's other issues that people have, and I get all that. But number one, immigration, inflation, and domestic energy. Those are the three things that we have to take a look at.
Inflation and domestic energy, what type of solution would you like to see put forward to address that?
The same things that we had before. Develop our own domestic energy. You know, at one time, Pennsylvania was known as the Saudi Arabia of natural gas.
Right.
We know there's other layers below where we are right now that we can tap into. We have assets that no other place in the world has. We have assets that everybody else in the world depends on us supplying them with, and that, by the way, includes their freedom. There's nobody that's more. America is the first responder to everything. If there's a tragedy somewhere, we're there. If there's some kind of a natural disaster, we're there. Whenever America is strong, the world is safe. When America's in flux the way it is right now, it invites those people that are our biggest enemies to say, you know what? They're failing, and the world is losing confidence in them, and at some point they're going to topple, and when they topple, we'll take over. I think it's a very grave situation. I don't think our people are as aware of it as they should be. This is a very dangerous time for America, probably the gravest danger we face since World War II, and it is growing each day with China and with Russia, what they're doing, and now with all the rest of those folks that are joining in, especially in the Middle East. That's a disaster. When America stays out of the battle, the bad guys win.
Now, you were talking about border security. You
Yes.
mentioned the northern border.
Yeah.
What do you want to see done? Obviously, it's longest undefended border
Yeah.
in the world.
Yeah.
But what would you propose to do if you?
Well,
if you could
there's several things you can do, but the Customs Border Control, right? There's not enough of those people there anymore. Most of them are down on the southwestern border, and a lot of them are doing intake information. If we don't get more people on the border, and if we don't use the other ways of patrolling those borders, you don't have to have men standing there, but we do have a way to surveil that. And we also have a way that we can put pressure on Canada as, you know what, you all need to help us through this situation. The same problem we're having with Mexico, they've opened up, they let people in. Canada does the same thing with us. They let a lot of people come in that they should be holding out. So it's our allies in the Northern Hemisphere that are the ones not doing their job, and we're expecting America to be able to take care of everybody in the world, plus take care of itself, and on its own dime. You can't do it. We need more people in Custom Border Control. They're the first people to tell you they are overworked, they're exhausted right now, and what's really bothering them is jurisdictionally they feel lost because the current administration is not pushing back on it. They're saying, no, there's no problem there. There is a huge problem there. Custom Border Control men are incredible. The men and women that are on that patrol, they're only there for one reason, and that is to protect our borders. And we need to get more of them there. So that would take funding to get more of them there. It would take training, and we'd be assets that they would need also for surveillance. They need to have more of that.
Now, you talked about putting pressure on Canada. What types of pressure would you envision?
Well, listen, everybody knows what the best pressure is. It's economic pressure. The most important thing for anybody, if you want people to start behaving the right way, you usually hit them in the wallet. Whenever we allow those things to happen and say, look, we're pretty close with each other, however, you're letting this happen to us. We look at what sanctions we can put on and where we should be stronger, and we need to put pressure on those people who we've always defended throughout history. I think if you have a good neighbor is more than somebody who's next door to you. It's somebody who's there every time you need them, and somebody who also feels the same way you do about protecting the Northern Hemisphere and making sure, do we want people to come here? Absolutely. Every one of us came here at one time or another. Somebody in our families came here, but they came through the right way. You can't have open borders and think that anything you're doing right now, when you look at our cities, the crime wave that's taken place, the horrific things that have taken place, you say, well, why did that happen? And when did it happen? What happened when you weren't looking? What do you mean you weren't looking? Whenever you have open borders, this is what happens. There's a lot of good people that have come through. They came through for the right reasons. There's a lot of bad people that have come through. We need to take them out of our country again and put them back where they came from.
The national deficit continues to grow.
Yep.
36 trillion, is that kind of in the ballpark there?
I think it's actually, I wish it was 36 trillion. I hear 34 trillion, 35 trillion, 36 trillion. Unfunded liabilities going into the future. Bonds is off somewhere right now of 125 trillion. Now, even when you say 35 trillion or 36 trillion, people's eyes roll back in their head because they have no idea, what does that mean? What does that look like?
Well, and how do you address it?
Yeah, well, how do you address it? You have to look at all the programs you have. Some programs are funded year after year after year, and they should have sunsetted before, right? They should have sunsetted. We're going to have to spend money in order to redo things that we have to do when it comes to security. Why would we ever be in a situation where we can't fund our military at the rate it has to be funded with it in a very dangerous world? Healthcare, all these things, education, all the things that build a stronger America are essential to fund. By the same token, what's really hurt when it comes to inflation is the fact that everything costs so much more now than it did, and people ask why. Well, we've watered down the value of our dollar also. The more you print money without it being backed by anything, the more dollars it's going to take than it used to take to buy the same product. So it's had a dramatic effect on our currency. I think when you look at the programs, the same as the business you run here, the same as the business that I run, I'm taking a look at what is my annual revenue and what is my cost of operation. If you have a family, how much do you make? How much does it cost to support your family? It's simple math. We've let that kind of go by the wayside. I think you have to have a real tight and strong look at it. Number one, the programs that are overfunded right now, that money is fungible. It can be moved almost anywhere.
Like what type of programs? Can you just throw like one or two examples like that's overfunded or should be sunsetted?
Well, I don't know. I wouldn't know where to start, where to stop. I mean, some of the things we have to fund, and other things I would look at and say, are they actually working the way they were intended to work, or are they being overworked right now and being taken advantage of? Remember, every single penny that we spend, not dollar, but every single penny comes out of a taxpayer's pocket. So when I hear it's government funded, I say, what's taxpayer supplied? So whether it's the money we're spending or the money we're borrowing, just to give you an example, last year we took in the most amount of revenue we've ever taken in over $5 trillion we've taken in tax revenues. We spent $6.3 trillion. People say, well, that's not really that great a difference. I said, no, but here's what it means. You made $50,000 last year. You spent $63,000. And they said, well, you can't do that. I said, no, you can't. The government can't. We can borrow money endlessly, or we can print money endlessly. The more we print, the more we devalue the actual value of that dollar. And I think we've all looked at it. From everything in my business that I've looked at, everything has gone up so great. And then how the answers then, or the question is, well, how do you offset that? Well, you've got to charge more for what used to cost less. And they said, but then people can't buy it. I said, that's right. And so if people can't buy it, then people can't stay in business. If you can't sell whatever it is you sell to make a living, whether it's news, whether it's cars or trucks, whether it's the energy business, whatever it is, I think we've become the point where we just don't see any limit to anything, and we can just keep spending money. There's no end to it. No, there's an end to it, but the end is really tragic. It's called bankruptcy.
Now, with that though, we haven't had really a budget passed. It's been very few years that a budget formally has been passed. We've got a continuing resolution till December.
Yeah.
How do you get a budget passed in Congress? I mean, is bipartisanship dead?
Well, I think anybody that's actually watched it or actually understands what you just said, they'll say, well, you can't do that in the private sector. I said, you can't do it in the private sector, but in the public sector, you can do anything you want. I don't care what it is you're running. Unless you have, as part of your policy is you have to balance a budget. We don't have to balance a budget. So when people say, well, you need to do this, well, to do that, it's unimaginable what you would have to do, and it's impossible. In the world we live in right now, because you can't separate. It's the constant battle. It's the constant battle about what we're spending. So the question then, and it's always comes back, is it guns or butter? What are you going to spend the money on, right? This goes back to day one in America. There are certain things that are essential, and we'll continue to fund them. But I go back again to what I said, every single penny comes out of a taxpayer's pocket. If you have people sitting in office that have never had to balance a budget in their own life, now that may be, some people may say, no, everybody has to do it. No, they don't. No, they don't. This budget hasn't been balanced, I think, since the mid-90s or something. That's when we had a big boom all of a sudden, and we had money come in that we weren't expecting. So we looked kind of good there, but then we went upside down again. I think right now we're probably at the greatest debt ratio that we've had since our world wars, where we had to go way over to spend money to keep America alive and keep the world alive. But we're bouncing off that right now. It would take really strong, not just strong legislators, but a strong public who's willing to say, it is time to tighten our belt. I know in the family, you sit down and you say, you know what, we're going to have to cut spending. And that's mom and dad working together to cut spending. Unfortunately with ours, it's the bad acts. So I'm going to have to cut some funding. Now, the American people would be okay with that if they understood where we're going, but they don't understand that, because for a lot of our folks, they're dependent on some of those programs. And as I said before, you have to take a look at every program and see, where are we overspending? Are we spending $1 and getting $1's worth back on it? Are we continuing to spend where there is no return on that investment, but we can't cut back the program because it may affect getting reelected?
Changing gears a little bit, there's the conflict in Ukraine with Russia. Do you support the current administration's position on that? And then if you're reelected and President Trump gets elected, do you see a change in direction there? Or do you want to see a change?
Yeah, that's a good question. I really can't answer that, because as we change, and it depends who's in office and who's not in office. I do think that at some point, I always thought from the very beginning, first of all, whenever Russia took over Crimea, I was just surprised that the Obama administration decided to do nothing about it. Now, if you're a member of NATO, I think the first responsibility for NATO should be protecting those nations that they're part of. Now, Ukraine's not part of it. Ukraine's not part of NATO. And why isn't Ukraine part of NATO? Because Russia told NATO do not allow them membership. And NATO kind of backed off on it. But I do think there's other places in the world that have a stake in this too. Why is it always America that has to step up? I think we funded Ukraine quite a bit. My question is, what's the rest of the world done to help Ukraine? What are the sanctions they put on Russia? What are the other sanctions that are taking place? Quite frankly, I'm tired of it just America being the first responder. And we are the first responder to everything bad that happens in the world. listen, Europe has a responsibility. Those people all have a responsibility. If you're worried about that, then jump on board. We welcome you to come in. Right now, I think we've maxed out. I think we've maxed out. And I know I have friends that say, yeah, but we need to help them more. And my backflow on that is always, so how are they spending the money we've already given them? Mm-hmm. Is there a return on that for them, for their safety? I don't know. But I do know that Russia thought it was going to be much easier to go into Ukraine, and they found out they're a lot tougher. They are very tough people. They've done an incredible job protecting their homeland. They've held Russia off. I think the rest of the world needs to jump on board now and help out, not just America. And I think we've done our share so far. That's not to say that sometime in the future something may come up that change, and we may have to respond to it differently. But for right now, I think we've paid our fair share. I want to see the rest of Europe get on board and help out.
And do you think the United States' interests in Israel a little different than what's going on in Ukraine?
When you talk about Israel now, you're talking about our only ally, our strongest ally in that part of the world. So I think we've helped Israel out considerably. We've given them assets right now.
Have we done enough?
Have we done enough? I don't know what is enough. My question is, what's wrong with the rest of the world? How can people sit back and watch these things happen and say, Israel needs to stop? They've gone too far right now. Well, I'll tell you what, I wasn't there on October 7th, but I think people look at that. And so when you look at how this started, this is a continuation after continuation after continuation. I think we stay with Israel as long as we can because those are our strongest friends in that part of the world. That is a really critical part of the world to be strong in. They're the only ones that are standing with us. Do I wish they could come up with a peaceful solution? Yeah, I wish they could. I don't know that it's possible between those two entities.
Now, you just mentioned that we stand with Israel as long
Yes.
as we can. What would be the tipping point for you where we wouldn't stand with Israel?
Well, I can't answer that because we'll see where we are. Israel seems to be able to do its own right now. We've always supplied with a lot of different assets, especially military equipment. So when you say what would be the tipping point, I would say that's hard to say sitting right here in Meadville saying, well, here's the tipping point. Here's where I draw a line, knowing that when people say that, it's usually a line in the sand because the line keeps changing. I think that you look at Israel. Israel by itself is very strong. I don't know of another country that is as strong as they are in a position they're in that they refuse to walk away from it. They say, no, not today, not in our watch. We're not going to let it happen. But is there any place else in the world that has been more attacked than they are right now? And after what happened October 7th a year ago, looking at this and thinking, no, these are people that just want to get along with you. So when they say from the river to the sea, what they mean is no more Israel. Done. Out. Get rid of them. I think it's easy to sit in Meadville and say, this is where I draw the line. I'll tell you what, I would take a look at it from a global situation. Where are we? How strong are we in the Mideast? I know we've given up a lot of assets over there. At this point right now, I would say we are doing as much as we can for Israel. Depending on how it escalates, we'll see what happens.
Well, that's the thing, is Israel now is telling the U.S. apparently that it would only hit Iran's military sites in retaliation for the drone attacks.
Yeah.
I mean, there's an escalation concern here.
Well, you know what, Keith, I'm not there. So if they were doing it, if somebody up in Erie was doing something to Meadville, I'm sure that'd be between Meadville and Erie to figure out when was it too much. So I think when people ask you questions like that, those are questions like, how are you going to answer that? Well, the answer is, who is our strongest ally in that part of the world? The answer is Israel. Are they doing enough? Are we doing enough? What's the rest of the world doing? I think you have to look at it collectively. I'm not going to make a statement saying, here, I'm sitting in Meadville today with nobody firing missiles into me, nobody's destroying my family, nobody's destroying my business, nobody's telling me what our goal is to annihilate you completely. I think that's a hard thing to say. I think it's good to talk about things here, but unless you've been through it, I don't think you have. I don't think you're at that position. So this is how I feel.
If you get elected, do you support Speaker Johnson for another term there as the speaker, or there's different interests within the Republican Party, and he's had to navigate a lot of different paths to get things accomplished. Would you like to see him?
I think it would be difficult to find somebody who could navigate what Speaker Johnson has gone through. He is a very bright young guy. He's a constitutional lawyer. More than anything else, he is a man of great faith. I've watched him as he's done what he's done with the Republican conference. I think he's really done a great job of keeping a very small majority together on the most important subjects. Is he under great pressure? Sure, he's under great pressure. Does he handle it well? He absolutely does. If we're in the majority again next year, I would be one of the first guys to jump on board and say Mike Johnson has done an incredible job through a very difficult period. He's been able to work with both sides, the strong conservatives, the people that are kind of in the middle in our party. He's been able to work with everybody, come together with something that actually makes sense and something really more important than keeping the American people or the Republican Party happy. I think he's done a great job representing the Congress for the United States.
And one final question for me. The 2024 election, do you have faith in the results? Do you like safeguards that are in place?
Well, so people ask us, so the results of the 2020 election are done. There's no question. Was Joe Biden elected? Yes, he was elected. My question back then is the same reason I had a lawsuit back then, is that Pennsylvania went outside its own voting laws and changed the laws, right? They can do that, but they would have had to go through a constitutional amendment to Pennsylvania's constitution. My objection was that we put into place something that hadn't gone through the process that it was supposed to. We had to amend our constitution, we didn't do it. It was the process that I objected to. The outcome is the outcome. And anybody that wonders, so yes, do I know that President Biden, I was there for his inauguration, right? I know he's the President of the United States. I've watched him and Ms. Harris run this country for the last almost 4 years. So there's no doubt in my mind who was in charge. I got it. Now, will I accept the election? I don't know what the election's going to look like. I just know this, that of all the time I've been in Congress, there was no greater objection to an election than whenever President Trump was elected in 2016. There was an outcry from the other side about, no, this isn't legitimate, no, he shouldn't be president, blah, 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 blah. And that was okay because that was part of the process. Now, you look at what happened in 2020, I think the main objection that I had was in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania went outside its own constitution on its voting laws. They changed it without going through an amendment to a constitution. My objection was that it was against our constitution. So the outcome was the outcome. I've been there. I've actually been with President Biden talking about several things. So I'm very comfortable knowing that he's the president and that Kamala Harris is the vice president. I don't think they've done a very good job.
Well, we're down to the end. We'll give you the last couple minutes.
Yeah,
if you'd like.
I think so. When we look at this, it's interesting. Things that people say, this is what I have an objection to. I would just say this. So you feel that you're better off today than you were prior to 2020. The country, until COVID came along, we were in an incredible run. People were happy. People were making money. There was no inflation like there is now. We were producing more energy than anybody in the world. We were exporting energy. We were the strongest country in the world. I think that what's happened since then, it looks like we've diminished our position in the globe. People aren't looking at that. Now, when you talk locally, people have different issues that they talk about. I say, but is that the biggest issue that's bothering you? And oftentimes they will say, no, but it's a personality thing with me. And I said, so it's just a personality. It's not on policy. And they'll go, no, policy is not important to me. I said, you need to rethink that. The most important thing in all our lives is the policy that we work under. You have the same thing here at this newspaper. I have the same thing at the dealership back home. The district has the same issues. It is always going to be policies. At the end of the day, we all have to be trying to do the same thing, and that is making America safe and strong and the strongest country in the world. When we're not leading, the rest of the world is losing. And I think under President Trump, we had a very strong economy, we had a very strong military. We were doing really well when it came to manufacturing, especially in domestic energy. We walked away from too much of that right now. And we've kind of taken a back seat globally. I don't think we're viewed the same way. The question always comes back, who would you rely on in a tight pinch? And I think most of us, I got a good friend I know I can rely on. The rest of the world used to look at America that way. I think there's a question now, is America strong enough to help us if things really get bad?
Well, thank you very much.
Oh,
We've
it's a
been
pleasure.
talking with Congressman Mike Kelly, who's seeking re-election in November. Congressman, we wish you good luck in your election. On behalf of the Meadville Tribune, I'm Keith Gushard, and on behalf of Rick Green, we bid you a good day.
Thank you.